You think soul food tastes the same now as it did back then? Think again. The 1970s were the final golden era of authentic African American cooking before shortcuts and convenience changed everything. Here are 30 reasons why soul food tasted so much better in the 1970s. Cast iron skillets were the heartbeat of every African American kitchen in the 1970s, seasoned over decades with layers of flavor no modern pan could replicate. These heavy black skillets had been passed down through generations, their surfaces holding the memory of thousands of meals. Every fried chicken breast, every pan of cornbread, every batch of smothered pork chops absorbed and contributed to that irreplaceable seasoning. The iron distributed heat evenly and slowly, creating crusts impossible to achieve on non-stick surfaces. Families guarded these skillets fiercely, never letting soap touch them, only wiping them clean and rubbing them with fat. The food that emerged carried depth from history itself. Modern cookware may be convenient, but it cannot hold the taste of time the way those blackened skillets did. Lard and animal fats were the foundation of flavor in 1970s soul food kitchens, providing richness that vegetable oils simply cannot match. Every serious cook kept a container of rendered pork fat near the stove, ready to add depth to vegetables, fry chicken to golden perfection, or create flaky biscuit crusts. The fat came from home-butchered hogs or local butchers who understood real cooking. This was about taste and tradition, passed through generations who knew flavor lived in the fat. When grandmothers fried catfish or made pie crusts, they reached for lard without hesitation. The move toward processed oils changed soul food fundamentally. What we gained in supposed health benefits, we lost in the unmistakable richness that once defined every dish. Homegrown vegetables from backyard gardens brought freshness to 1970s. Soul food that grocery store produce cannot touch. Families cultivated collards, tomatoes, okra, and squash in small plots, picking them hours before they reached the dinner table. The soil was rich with compost, producing vegetables with intense flavor that mass-produced crops lack. Children helped tend these gardens, learning which plants needed more water and when to harvest for peak taste. This connection to the earth meant every meal carried the pride of self-sufficiency. Tomatoes tasted like summer itself, and collard greens held sweetness that disappeared once shipped across the country in refrigerated trucks. The loss of backyard gardens severed a direct link between families and their food, replacing it with bland supermarket convenience. Hand-churned butter appeared on soul food tables throughout the 1970s, offering richness that store-bought sticks could never match. Families with rural connections often received fresh butter made the old way, its color deeper and flavor more complex than anything mass-produced. This butter melted into hot cornbread with sweet nuttiness, transformed vegetables into something luxurious, and made biscuits taste special. Churning required patience and willingness to work for quality rather than accepting convenience. Even urban families sometimes made their own when cream was available, treating it as a connection to traditions. The taste difference was unmistakable. Modern butter, standardized for shelf stability, carries none of the character that homemade versions brought to every plate they touched. Fresh-killed chickens meant something entirely different in 1970s soul food than the plastic-wrapped packages lining grocery cases today. Families bought birds from local farmers or backyard coops, selecting them live and knowing exactly what they ate. These chickens had scratched in dirt, eaten natural diets, and developed flavor through actual movement. The meat was firmer, required longer cooking, and rewarded patience with taste that factory-farmed poultry cannot approach. Preparing these birds involved plucking, cleaning, and breaking down the carcass by hand. Sunday, fried chicken from a fresh-killed bird was an event, its golden crust giving way to meat so flavorful it needed nothing beyond simple seasoning. What we eat now is a shadow of what soul food chicken once meant. Wood stoves and slow cooking defined the pace and flavor of 1970s soul food in ways electric ranges cannot replicate. Many African American households, especially in the rural South, still cooked on wood-burning stoves requiring constant attention that rewarded patience with unmatched results. The heat was uneven and demanded skill, teaching cooks to rotate pots, adjust dampers, and develop intuition modern appliances made unnecessary. Food cooked this way absorbed subtle smoke flavors and developed textures through hours of gentle simmering. Collard greens, neckbones, and beans transformed over these stoves into dishes with depth that instant pots cannot create. The decline of wood stove cooking took something irreplaceable from soul food tradition. What we gained in speed, we lost in patient flavors only time and fire could create. Collard greens from the garden carried sweetness and tenderness in the 1970s that shipped in bunches have lost entirely. Families planted collards in spring and fall, harvesting leaves at their peak after the first frost converted their starches to sugar. These greens were massive, deep green, and so fresh they squeaked when washed. Cooking them was an all-day affair, simmering low with smoked meat until they became silky and rich with potlikker worth drinking alone. The taste was simultaneously bitter, sweet, and savory in a balance that grocery store collards cannot achieve. Children who grew up eating garden collards developed a taste that mass-produced versions could never satisfy. The connection between soil, season, and table gave these greens meaning beyond nutrition, making them taste like heritage itself. Homemade hot sauce sat on every soul food table in the 1970s, its heat calibrated to family preferences over years of careful adjustment. These sauces were crafted from garden peppers preserved in vinegar, sometimes with garlic or fruit, always with character that bottled brands could not replicate. Each family's version was unique, passed down and tweaked until it became as personal as a signature. The heat was layered and complex, building rather than attacking, complementing food instead of overwhelming it. Shaking that familiar bottle over fried fish or greens connected each meal to countless meals before it. Commercial hot sauces offer convenience, but sacrifice individuality that made homemade versions irreplaceable. When those family recipes stopped being made, something essential disappeared from soul food tables. Fresh ground cornmeal from local mills gave 1970s cornbread a texture and flavor that commercial products have completely lost. Small mills throughout the South ground corn to order, produce a meal with the germ and oils intact, giving it sweetness and depth that degerminated versions lack. This cornmeal was alive with flavor, requiring refrigeration because its natural oils would turn rancid. Cornbread made from fresh meal had crumbly richness, golden color, and taste that made it more than just a side dish. Families knew which mills produced the best meal and would drive miles to get it, understanding that this single ingredient determined quality. As small mills closed and mass production took over, cornmeal became standardized, stripped of character for shelf life. The cornbread that once anchored soul food meals became ordinary. Rendered bacon fat stored in jars beside every stove was the secret weapon of 1970s soul food that modern kitchens have abandoned. This precious grease, saved from breakfast and accumulated over weeks, added smoky depth to vegetables and gravies that no other fat could provide. Cooks spooned it into cast iron before frying eggs, stirred it into green beans, and used it to start dishes that would otherwise taste flat. The fat carried concentrated pork flavor, transforming simple ingredients into something memorable. Children watched their mothers strain hot bacon grease into waiting containers, learning that waste was unacceptable and flavor worth saving. When health concerns eliminated this practice, soul food lost an essential flavor foundation. The dishes we make now without rendered fat are missing what made them worth eating. Smoked meats from local smokehouses gave 1970s soul food a depth of flavor that liquid smoke cannot approach. Small operations throughout the South smoked hams, bacon, and sausages using hardwood fires tended for days, infusing meat with genuine smoke character. These smokehouses were community institutions where families brought hogs after fall butchering. The meat emerged transformed, its fat rendered and flavored, its taste complex with notes of oak, hickory, or pecan. This smoked pork seasoned every pot of greens, every batch of beans, every skillet of vegetables. When industrial processing replaced local smokehouses, soul food lost access to this irreplaceable ingredient. What we buy now labeled smoked is merely flavored, carrying none of the authentic character that once defined every dish. Lard rendering and storage techniques were essential knowledge that determined the quality of every fried dish coming from African American kitchens. Families acquired fresh pork fat from local butchers, cut it into small cubes, and cooked it slowly over the lowest heat for hours. The process required constant attention, stirring regularly to prevent scorching, while fat liquefied into pure white liquid gold. Once rendered, lard was strained through cheesecloth multiple times to remove crackling remnants that could burn during frying. Storage was equally precise, with families keeping rendered lard in ceramic crocks or glass jars in cool cellars where it remained fresh for months. Some households added salt to extend shelf life. This homemade lard produced fried foods with flavors that commercial shortenings could never duplicate. Fresh eggs from backyard chickens appeared in 1970s soul food with yolks so orange and rich they seemed to glow. Families kept small flocks scratching in yards, eating bugs and scraps, producing eggs with flavor that factory farms cannot replicate. These eggs made cornbread rise higher, custards set richer, and breakfast plates shine with color that supermarket eggs lack entirely. Children gathered eggs each morning as a chore, connecting them directly to their food. The shells were thicker, the whites firmer, and the taste unmistakably superior to anything bought in stores. When zoning laws and convenience eliminated backyard flocks from homes, soul food lost one of its most essential ingredients. Every cake, every custard, every fried egg today is a diminished version of what those backyard hands once provided. Whole spices ground by hand in 1970s kitchens released oils and aromatics that pre-ground versions have already lost. Cooks kept nutmeg whole and grated it fresh over sweet potato pie, cracked peppercorns in mortars, and toasted cumin seeds before crushing them. This extra step made enormous difference because spices begin losing potency the moment they are ground, and commercial powders may sit for months. The fragrance that filled kitchens when spices were freshly prepared announced that something special was being made. Grandmothers knew this intuitively, keeping small grinders beside their stoves. The convenience of pre-ground spices saved time but sacrificed intensity that made soul food memorable. What we shake from bottles now is a ghost of the flavor that fresh grinding once provided. Sunday dinners that took all day created layers of flavor impossible to achieve with quick cooking. African American families treated Sunday meals as sacred events, starting preparations after church and serving hours later when everything had simmered to perfection. Roasts slow cooked until fork tender, greens softened for hours absorbing pot liquor, and desserts cooled while anticipation built. This timing was about chemistry that transforms tough cuts into tender meat and vegetables into complex dishes. The house filled with aromas announcing celebration before anyone sat down. When busy schedules compressed Sunday dinners into quick meals, soul food lost the time it needed to develop properly. The dishes may share names with what we ate then, but they cannot share the depth only hours of cooking can create. Cornmeal coating techniques brought distinctive southern crunch to fried fish, okra, and countless other dishes. African American cooks understood that cornmeal required different handling than flour, demanding specific textures to achieve its signature crispy coating. The cornmeal was often stone ground locally, with coarser textures preferred for fish, while finer grinds worked better for vegetables. Seasoning was mixed directly into cornmeal, with some cooks adding small amounts of flour to improve adhesion, while others used pure cornmeal for maximum crunch. The coating process required pressing food firmly into the meal, ensuring complete coverage that formed an unbroken shell during frying. Temperature control was critical with cornmeal, as it browned faster than flour. These techniques defined Southern fried catfish. Recipes passed down orally carry measurements and techniques that written instructions could never capture. Grandmothers taught by demonstration, showing exactly how much salt fit in a palm, how batter should look when mixed, and when greens had cooked long enough by their color. This knowledge was embodied, stored in hands and eyes rather than paper, refined through generations. Each family's version of common dishes differed based on these transmissions, creating distinctive tastes belonging to specific bloodlines. The cook's judgment mattered more than any recipe because she knew when to add more liquid and when a dish was done. As families scattered and oral traditions broke, this embodied knowledge disappeared. Cookbooks captured ingredients but missed the intuition that made the difference between adequate food and soul food. Community fish fries brought neighborhoods together around freshly caught catfish cooked in massive outdoor kettles. Men who knew local rivers supplied the fish, cleaning them while women prepared cornmeal batter and heated oil over wood fires. The social dimension mattered as much as food because these gatherings strengthened bonds and created shared memories. Children ran between tables while elders sat telling stories, and everyone ate fish so fresh it had been swimming that morning. The cornmeal coating crisped in properly heated oil, the flesh inside stayed moist, and the entire experience felt like celebration. When these community events became rare, soul food lost one of its essential contexts. The fish we eat now may be fried correctly, but it cannot replicate what those gatherings meant. Hog killings in late fall provided fresh pork that transformed soul food for months afterward. Families gathered when temperatures dropped enough to safely process meat, turning a single hog into hams, bacon, sausage, and countless cuts. Nothing was wasted because every part had value, from the head becoming souse to intestines cleaned for chitterlings. The work was hard but communal, with neighbors helping each other and sharing the bounty. Fresh pork from a well-fed hog tasted entirely different from supermarket meat, its fat sweeter and flesh more flavorful. The transition to commercial processing eliminated not just this community ritual, but the quality of meat that made soul food exceptional. What we buy now cannot approach the taste of hogs raised on scraps, acorns, and thyme. Buttermilk from local dairies had a tangy richness that modern cultured versions cannot match. Real buttermilk was the liquid left after churning butter, thin and flavorful with natural bacteria that made biscuits rise and fried chicken coat and crisp perfectly. Dairies delivered it fresh in glass bottles, and cooks used it within days while it retained character. This buttermilk made cornbread tender, lightened batters, and added complexity to every recipe. The live cultures interacted with baking soda to create lift that artificial versions achieve less effectively. When small dairies closed and commercial cultured buttermilk replaced the real thing, soul food lost an irreplaceable ingredient. The biscuits, cornbread, and fried chicken we make now are approximations of dishes that once tasted noticeably better. Seasonal cooking and preservation meant that 1970s soul food followed rhythms modern convenience has erased. Families ate what grew in current seasons and preserved the rest through canning, smoking, and pickling. Summer meant fresh tomatoes and corn, fall brought sweet potatoes, and winter relied on what had been put up during abundant months. This approach meant anticipation for favorite foods and genuine appreciation when they appeared. Canned tomatoes made in August carried summer flavor through cold months, and pickled vegetables added brightness to winter meals. The connection between earth and table was immediate. When supermarkets made everything available year-round, soul food lost its calendar and the special meaning seasonal availability once provided. Eating strawberries in January eliminates the joy waiting once created. Cooking with love and patience was not just sentiment, but a tangible ingredient in 1970s soul food that hurried meals lack. Grandmothers stood over stoves for hours because they understood that attention affected outcomes in ways recipes could not explain. They tasted constantly, adjusted seasoning by intuition, and refused to serve anything before its time. This patience allowed flavors to develop fully, textures to soften properly, and dishes to reach their potential. The emotional investment showed in every bite because food made with hurry never tasted right. Children learned that cooking was an act of love expressed through ingredients and time. When convenience became priority, soul food lost the intangible element that elevated it beyond nutrition. The same recipes made quickly never achieve what slow cooking once created. Church dinners and potlucks created competition that pushed cooks to their absolute best every single time. Women brought signature dishes knowing they would be judged against neighbors who had been perfecting the same recipes for decades. This friendly rivalry elevated soul food because reputations depended on performance, and no one wanted to bring home an untouched dish. The church basement became a testing ground where only the finest versions of fried chicken, greens, and cakes survived. Cooks guarded secrets while trying to outdo each other, creating an environment rewarding excellence. Children learned early which church mother made the best potato salad. When church attendance declined and potlucks became rare, soul food lost this crucible of quality that had refined recipes for generations. Seasoned salt blending was a personalized art that gave each family's fried foods their distinctive taste. African American cooks created custom spice mixtures combining salt with paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and sometimes cayenne. These blends were mixed in large batches and stored in repurposed jars, always within arm's reach during cooking. The proportions varied by family, with some preferring heavier garlic notes while others emphasized heat. Children grew up recognizing their grandmother's specific seasoned salt as the taste of home, a flavor impossible to replicate with store-bought alternatives. Some cooks guarded exact ratios as closely held secrets, revealing them only to trusted family members. These personalized blends transformed identical ingredients into dishes that tasted uniquely like one kitchen. Well, water from deep sources gave 1970s soul food a mineral quality that treated city water cannot provide. Rural families drew water from wells dug by ancestors. Its taste clean and slightly earthy with trace minerals affecting everything it touched. This water made tea taste richer, soup broth deeper, and beans cooked to better texture than chlorinated municipal supplies. Cooks knew intuitively that water mattered, even if they could not explain why. Coffee brewed with well water had roundness that tap water flattens, and vegetables simmered in it absorbed subtle flavors. When rural families moved to cities or connected to municipal systems, this invisible ingredient disappeared. The same recipes made with treated water taste different in ways most people cannot identify but somehow notice. Sharing food with neighbors created accountability that kept soul food standards impossibly high. When you knew your greens might be served next door or your cake carried to a sick friend, every dish represented your family's cooking legacy. This social pressure meant no shortcuts, no lazy substitutions, no serving anything less than your best. Neighbors talked, and a reputation for excellent cooking was earned over years and lost in a single disappointing dish. The food that left your kitchen carried your name, so pride demanded perfection. Children delivered plates to elderly neighbors and returned with honest reviews. When neighborhoods fractured and people stopped sharing food across fences, soul food lost this quality control system. Cooking only for immediate family removed the social stakes that once made every meal matter. Hand-cranked ice cream at summer gatherings produced texture and freshness that store-bought versions cannot match. Families gathered on porches, taking turns at the crank while rock salt and ice worked their magic on custard made from fresh cream, eggs, and fruit. The process was slow and communal, building anticipation until the dasher stopped and the reward could be served. Children fought over who got to lick the paddle, while adults scooped portions into waiting bowls. The ice cream that emerged was dense, intensely flavored, and so cold it made teeth ache. Peaches picked that morning gave each batch seasonal character impossible to replicate commercially. When electric freezers and store-bought cartons replaced the hand-crank ritual, dessert became convenient but lost the event that made it meaningful. Pig feet, ears, and tails added gelatin and richness to 1970s soul food that lean, modern cuts cannot provide. Cooks understood that these odd parts, simmered for hours, released collagen making beans, silky, greens unctuous, and broths impossibly rich. Nothing was wasted because everything had value, and parts most people discarded were often most flavorful. Preparing these cuts required knowledge and patience, skills passed from mothers to daughters who understood texture came from fat and connective tissue. The dishes made with these ingredients had body that amazed anyone unfamiliar with traditional techniques. When convenience eliminated these parts from shopping lists, soul food lost depth that cannot be replaced with lean pork loin. The silky texture of properly made beans came directly from parts we now throw away. Cooking over open fires at family reunions added smoke and char that indoor cooking cannot achieve. Large gatherings happened outdoors, where men tended pits dug in the ground, cooking whole hogs or massive quantities of ribs over hardwood coals. The smoke infused meat with flavor that no grill can fully replicate. Uncontrolled heat created variations in texture, producing crispy bits and tender sections, making each serving unique. Children watched and learned how to tend fires, understanding that cooking over flame was different from turning a knob. The social ritual of outdoor cooking brought families together around heat and smoke in ways microwave dinners never could. When these gatherings became less frequent, soul food lost both the cooking method and the community context that gave it meaning.
Chicken salad stuffed in cherry tomatoes created colorful, bite-sized portions that children eagerly grabbed. The cool, creamy chicken salad contrasting with the fresh, slightly tart tomato cups that held everything together. Aunties would hollow out cherry tomatoes using small spoons or melon ballers, creating little edible bowls that were functional and beautiful when arranged on serving platters. The chicken salad was made from finely chopped cooked chicken mixed with mayonnaise, diced celery, sweet pickle relish, and seasonings. The mixture kept cold until serving time. Each hollowed tomato was filled with a generous spoonful of chicken salad, mounded slightly on top for visual appeal. In 1970s Black households, these stuffed tomatoes represented creativity and presentation, transforming simple ingredients into appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and combined familiar flavors in a fun format. Kidney stew was organ meat cooking at its richest, made by slowly braising pork or beef kidneys until tender and flavorful. Black mothers soaked the kidneys in milk or vinegar to remove any strong flavors, then sliced them and cooked them slowly with onions and gravy. The resulting stew was dark, savory, and intensely meaty, providing iron and protein that growing families needed. The kidneys had a unique texture, tender but slightly firm, and a flavor that was rich and mineral. Served over rice or with bread, kidney stew was filling and economical. In the 1920s, organ meats were common because they cost less than muscle meat but provided equal nutrition. Mothers knew that kidneys, properly prepared, were delicious rather than desperate food. The soaking process removed any unpleasant flavors, and slow cooking made them tender. Children who grew up eating kidney stew didn't find it strange. It was simply dinner. The dish represented nose-to-tail eating before it became a culinary trend. Kidney stew has largely disappeared as organ meats fell out of favor, but it once provided essential nourishment to Black families.
Lima beans and rice was the simple Christmas side that stretched pennies into plates full of comfort and complete protein. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered with ham hocks, onions, garlic, and bay leaves until creamy and tender. The beans were spooned over fluffy white rice, the cooking liquid becoming a rich gravy that tied everything together. Lima beans cost almost nothing and expanded dramatically during cooking, making a single bag feed large families. The ham hocks added smoky depth without requiring expensive cuts of meat. This dish appeared at Christmas dinners throughout Black communities in the 1970s, often overshadowed by flashier dishes, but quietly keeping everyone satisfied. Lima beans and rice proved that humble ingredients, prepared with care, created comfort worth celebrating.
Neckbones and potatoes simmered on back burners throughout Sunday mornings, where economy and flavor found perfect balance in Harlem kitchens. Pork neckbones were browned first to develop fond, then slow cooked with water, onions, garlic, and seasonings until meat became tender enough to slip from the bone easily. Potatoes were added during the last hour, cut into chunks that absorbed the porky, slightly gelatinous broth until they tasted like concentrated comfort food. Families bought neckbones cheaply from butchers who sold them as scraps, not realizing they were handing over flavorful cuts with incredible depth. Mothers stretched these bones across multiple meals, serving meat and potatoes Sunday, with leftover broth becoming Monday soup for the family. Children learned to pick every shred from the small bones, wasting nothing at all. This wasn't fancy food, but honest, filling fare that carried the wisdom of generations, who knew careful cooking transformed the cheapest ingredients into something families genuinely craved. Cheese wafers made with sharp cheddar and butter created crispy, salty crackers that children munched by the handful, their homemade quality far superior to anything store-bought could offer. Grandmothers would cream softened butter with finely shredded sharp cheddar cheese, then gradually add flour, salt, and cayenne pepper, until the mixture formed a stiff dough. The dough was rolled into logs, wrapped in wax paper, and chilled until firm, then sliced into thin rounds and baked until golden brown and crispy. As they baked, the cheese melted into the butter and flour, creating crackers that were rich, savory, and addictively crunchy with just a hint of heat from the cayenne. In 1970s, Black households, cheese wafers represented Southern tradition and hospitality, recipes that had been passed down through generations. Children loved cheese wafers because they tasted like cheesy potato chips but felt more sophisticated since they were homemade. Red rice with sausage brought low-country goula traditions to Harlem Sunday tables where families recreated coastal Carolina flavors in apartment kitchens. The dish started with rendered sausage fat, then onions, peppers, and celery were sautéed before crushed tomatoes were added and cooked down. Rice was added directly to this base and cooked until each grain absorbed color and flavor, turning everything a deep, beautiful red. Smoked sausage coins were folded in at the end, adding pockets of savory richness. The dish carried complex flavors from simple ingredients, proving technique mattered more than expensive components. Gullah families who migrated north brought this recipe as cultural treasure, teaching it to children who had never seen the Sea Islands. The rice had to be cooked precisely, neither mushy nor undercooked. Red rice appeared at Sunday dinners and celebrations throughout Harlem, its distinctive color making it instantly recognizable.
Pig feet stew was the Christmas dish that connected 1970s tables to generations of Southern cooking tradition and thrifty wisdom. Pig feet were scrubbed clean, split, and simmered for hours with onions, garlic, bay leaves, and vinegar until the meat turned silky and the collagen melted into rich, unctuous broth. The texture was unlike anything else. Tender meat surrounded by gelatinous goodness that satisfied on cold December nights. Pig feet cost almost nothing at the butcher counter, since most shoppers passed them by. But Black families knew their value, understanding that slow cooking transformed these humble cuts into something approaching luxury. The stew was served with rice or cornbread to soak up every drop. Pig feet stew reminded everyone that the best holiday cooking came from patience and tradition.
Asparagus, wrapped in ham, created elegant finger food that introduced children to vegetables they might not try otherwise, the salty ham making the asparagus taste less intimidating. Mothers would blanch fresh asparagus spears briefly in boiling water until they turned bright green and became slightly tender, then plunge them into ice water. Each asparagus spear was then wrapped with a thin slice of deli ham, sometimes spread with cream cheese or mustard first for extra flavor. The wrapped spears were arranged on serving platters, sometimes secured with toothpicks if the ham wouldn't stay wrapped. In Black households during the 1970s, asparagus wrapped in ham represented sophistication borrowed from magazine recipes, appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because the ham provided familiar salty flavor, while the asparagus added crunch and color, making vegetables feel like treats rather than obligations. Cracklin bread brought satisfying crunch of rendered pork fat into cornbread that elevated simple bread for Harlem families who remembered Southern traditions. Pork skin was rendered slowly until it became crispy cracklins, those golden bits of fat and skin that shattered between teeth. These cracklins were folded into cornbread batter made from stone-ground cornmeal and buttermilk. The bread baked in preheated cast iron, its bottom developing the crusty layer that separated good cornbread from great. Each bite delivered corn sweetness, interrupted by pockets of salty, crunchy pork, releasing fat when bitten. This bread accompanied every Sunday meal, used to soak up potlikker, gravy, and bean juice alike. Cracklin bread represented complete utilization of the hog that defined African American cooking. Families passed this recipe through generations without writing it down, each cook adjusting by feel. Best eaten hot when cracklins still maintained crunch.
Fried okra with tomatoes was the summer garden dish that appeared on Christmas tables when families preserved their harvests to last through winter. Okra was sliced, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried until crispy before being combined with stewed tomatoes seasoned with onion and pepper. The combination balanced the okra's texture with tomato acidity, while the cornmeal added satisfying crunch. Families who grew their own okra and tomatoes made this dish for almost nothing. It connected Christmas celebrations to summer gardens and the work of putting food by. Fried okra with tomatoes represented the cycle of seasons that shaped soul food traditions.
Spinach dip, served with crackers and vegetables, was creamy, savory goodness that children scooped up enthusiastically. The rich cream cheese and sour cream base mixed with chopped spinach and seasonings, creating dips that tasted indulgent. Aunties would thaw frozen chopped spinach and squeeze out all the excess water before mixing it with softened cream cheese, sour cream, mayonnaise, dried vegetable soup mix, and sometimes water chestnuts for added crunch. The mixture was stirred together until smooth and well combined, then refrigerated for several hours to allow flavors to meld and develop depth. Some families served the dip cold, while others baked it briefly to create warm, bubbling cheese pulls that made every scoop exciting. In 1970s, Black households, spinach dip represented modern entertaining, recipes that came from package instructions but became beloved traditions. Children loved spinach dip because the vegetables were hidden in creamy richness, making them willing to eat greens. Stewed oxtails with butter beans represented Sunday luxury in Harlem apartments where families gathered after church to share meals that simmered all morning long. The oxtails were browned until deeply caramelized, then braised for hours with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and thyme until meat surrendered from the bone completely. Butter beans were added in the final hour, absorbing the rich gravy until they turned creamy and almost velvety. The dish filled small kitchens with aromas that drifted into hallways, announcing celebration to everyone nearby. For families who had migrated north during the Great Migration, oxtails were affordable cuts that transformed into something magnificent through patience and skill. Women learned this dish from their mothers in Georgia and Alabama, carrying recipes in memory rather than on paper. Children fought over the marrow, scooping it out with bread corners eagerly. This wasn't just Sunday dinner, but a bridge between Southern roots and Northern dreams and aspirations.
Turnip green potlikker was the liquid gold that 1970s Black families refused to waste, knowing its value went beyond the greens themselves. After turnip greens simmered for hours with smoked meat, the remaining broth held vitamins, minerals, and deep savory flavor. Some families sipped it straight from cups, while others soaked cornbread in bowls of the greenish liquid. Potlikker was given to the sick and elderly, believed to restore strength. On Christmas, it represented the philosophy of waste nothing that sustained Black families through generations. Children learned to appreciate potlikker by watching elders savor every drop. The practice connected 1970s tables to ancestors who understood nourishment came in many forms. Potlikker proved that soul food wisdom extended beyond recipes.
Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form. Chitlins with vinegar and onions appeared on special Sunday tables where families celebrated tradition regardless of how neighbors reacted to the distinctive aroma. Pig intestines were cleaned meticulously over hours, boiled repeatedly with vinegar to remove impurity before being simmered with onions, bay leaves, and crushed red pepper until tender. The smell announced itself boldly through hallways and streets. For families who understood, chitlins represented ultimate waste-nothing cooking, transforming what others discarded into something deeply flavorful. The texture was chewy and slightly gelatinous, requiring thorough cooking but rewarding patience. Hot sauce and additional vinegar were passed at the table for personal adjustment. This wasn't everyday food, but holiday and Sunday fare reserved for gatherings where everyone understood cultural significance. Eating chitlins in Harlem connected families to Southern roots and ancestors who first made this dish.
Which 1970s soul food secret do you miss the most? Drop your memory in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from the past.